Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We will presenting on the influence of al-Andalus on modern Europe. The prosperity of al-Andalus has led to a lot of discoveries and opened a new window to the era of science, language, and culture. There are a lot of philosophers in al-Andalus that has brought Muslim Spain well known to the world until it reached modern Europe. A lot of fields has been discovered by the al-Andalus philosophers, and it includes science, technology, culture, linguistics, and literature. This knowledge has since developed, translated, and practiced by many scholars even to this day. Now, I will be presenting on the influence of al-Andalus on modern Europe in terms of astronomy, earth sciences, psychology, and sociology. In the 11th until 12th century, astronomers took up the challenge posed by Ibn al-Haytham and developed an alternate non-Ptolemaic configuration that avoided errors found in the Ptolemaic models. A list of objections toward Ptolemaic astronomy was included in an anonymous Andalusian work titled Al-Istadrak ala Bartholomeus, which means recapitulation regarding Ptolemy. This event marked the beginning of Andalusian revolts against Ptolemaic astronomy. In the 12th century, Ibn Rushd, also known as Averroes, rejected the eccentric difference by Ptolemy and argued for a strict concentric model of the universe instead. Moreover, Ibn Bajjah also proposed that the Milky Way was made of many stars, but it was actually a continuous image caused by the refraction in the Earth's atmosphere. Later on, Ibn Tufar and Nur al-Batrugi, which were Ibn Bajjah's successors, proposed planetary model without any equine, epicycles, or eccentric. Al-Batrugi also was the first to discover that the planets are self-luminous. However, their work were not accepted due to the numerical predictions of their planetary positions model was less accurate than Ptolemaic model because they followed Aristotle's notion of perfect circular motion. Moving on to the earth sciences, in the 11th century, Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Mu'az wrote a work on optics which was later translated into Latin as Liber de Crepusculis, but it was mistakenly attributed to Al-Hasan. The work consists of an estimation of the angle of depression of the sun at the beginning of the morning twilight and at the end of the evening twilight. This attempt to calculate on the basis of this and other data that hide the atmospheric moisture responsible for the reflection of the sun rays has obtained the accurate value of 18 degrees, which comes close to the modern value. In 13th century, an Andalusian Arabian biologist named Abu al-Abbas al-Nabati developed an early scientific method for botany. His student Ibn al-Baita published Kitab al-Jami fi al-Adawiyya al-Mufrada, in which became the greatest botanical compilations in history, and thus became a botanical authority for centuries. It contained at least 1,400 different plants, foods, and drugs, in which 300 of them being from his own discoveries. His work became influential in Europe after it was translated into Latin in 1758. In psychology and sociology field, Abu al-Qasim, also known as Abul Qasis, who is the father of modern surgery, developed material and technical designs which are still used in neurosurgery. Ibn Zuhri or Avenzoar gave the first accurate descriptions on neurological disorders, including meningitis, intracranial thrombophlebitis, and mediastinal germ cell tumors, and contribute to modern neuropharmacology. Meanwhile, Averroes suggested that the existence of Parkinson's disease and attributed photoreceptor properties to the retina. Maimonides wrote about neuropsychiatric disorders and described rabies and belladonna intoxication. Lastly, Said al-Andalusi stated that people in all corners of the world have a common origin but different in certain aspects like ethics, appearance, and language. He treated the history of Egypt as a part of the universal history of humanity and linked it to the Arabs' ancestry to Hajar, the wife of Ibrahim and mother to Ismail. He also wrote Tabakat al-Ummam, which has been transcribed and translated into many different languages in many periods and cultures.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Yutian. I'm going to show you the geography and exploration in modern Andalus. The rapid expansion of territory and Muslim rule fall in line with Quran recommendations to encourage travel in search of knowledge and other benefits. For example, Allah says in Surah Al-Hajj, "Have they not traveled in the land, and have they heard wherewith to fear and wherewith to hear?" Surah Al-Hajj 46 ayah. By the 8th century, Muslim lands stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the border of China, and from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. At the moment, long-distance travel created a need for mapping, and travels often provided the information to achieve the task. Andalus is a part of the Muslim territorial expansion, which many excellent geographers and their books have come out here. The first one is Abdul Ubayy Abu Bakr, who wrote a book of highways and of kingdoms, and is well known for his early description of West Africa. He wrote a geography of the Arabian Peninsula, listing various towns and places of interest to Muslim travelers. He created an encyclopedia of the world, including its known countries, their people, customs, histories, and climate, and listing their cities and landmarks, and relied on several earlier successes, including Tariqi and Warigi. The second geographer is Ibn Sa'id Maghreb. He wrote a geographic work. This information reached from West Africa to Mongolia, and included latitude and longitude coordinates that allows soldiers to create maps from his work. The third geographer, who studied at Gombak, he traveled far and wide and collected information for Roger to Norman King of Sicily, who supported the publication of a set of maps and information called for Book of Roger. The information contained in the Book of Roger was also engraved on a silver planisphere, a Dixie-shaped map that was one of the wonders of the age. The Backlus, as known as the Backlus or Jacob's staff, was one of the earliest navigation instruments devised by Henry the Navigator's School of Navigation, as seen in the illustration above the consistence of the geograted staff and an or more sliding vane. In use, one end of the staff is held next to the early wheel, where the vane is adjusted so that the end of the vane align with the handraiser and a cluster to determine altitude. The Portuguese introduced it for the maritime use around 1515. Now walking to America's contact series, Its explorers from Andalus may have traveled to the Americas and possibly made contact with the indigenous people of the Americas. In Ali Masudi's maps of the world, there is a large area in the ocean southwest of Africa, which he preferred to as Majalu, Arabic for unknown territory. Some have argued that here may be a reference to the America. According to the historian Abu Bakr ibn Umar, another Muslim navigator, Ibn Farouk from Granada, it across to the Atlantic in February 999 year, landed in Jundal, where he visited the Guanches king and continued westward, where he eventually saw unnamed two islands, and he arrived back in Andalus in May 999 year. Columbus, when he made his voyage to the Americas in 1492 year, he was accompanied by several Muslim sailors, Andalusian Moors, who traveled with him to the New World, as well as Andalusian Jews who attempted to speak Arabic in Cuba. It has been claimed that Columbus' son, he also records that his father landed in Genoa from Muslim shipmen that visited the place, that it was possible to reach India by sailing west of the European continent as an alternative to sailing eastward. There are many famous physicians in Andalus. For example, the first head of the House of Wisdom in the 18th century, and a physician who contributed knowledge about the anatomy of eyes. He was a history, Christian, mathematician, and physician. His religionist served the ambassador in Baghdad court as physician for generations. The second is Ibn Juju. He wrote a commentary and Greider's work of pharmacology, dermatology, medicine, and wrote categories of physicians, a history of medicine from Greeks to his time. The third is Abdul Qasim or Zuhail. He is best known as a surgeon and served Hakim II as court physician. He wrote about other disease and treatment in his book, a leading medicine text in European universities after his translation into Latin. Now walking to Ibn Zuhr. Ibn Zuhr, he was the first to describe pericardial abscesses of the heart and to recommend treaty aspirin when necessary. Ibn Zuhr, he was a standard medicine work in Europe and translated into Latin in 1280 year. Next is Ibn Khatib. Ibn Khatib. He wrote an important book during the time of the Black Death. He wrote the factor of inflection became clear to the investigator, whereas he who is not in contact remains safe. He described how transmission happens through clean vessels at a time when nothing was known about vessels and bacteria.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Fiqri Hafizi bin Yusri 1911521. I'll be the one presenting about the influence of technology of al-Andalus to modern Europe. Okay, first of all, the influence of technology of al-Andalus to the modern Europe consists of three major influence, which is from the perspective of infrastructure, agriculture, and also aviation. Okay, so let's take a look at the influence. First of all, we're gonna take a look at infrastructure influence on modern Europe. Okay, under the infrastructure, there are three main influence, which is from in mills, industrial mills, and not basically just water mills, but it's mills. There are mills like bridge mills, finery forge, or also known as hydro-powered mills, stem mills, fulling mills, steel mills. There are other mills. Also, windmills. Windmills is separated from water mills, and it is created from different century, which is horizontal windmills, which is it is created later than the water mills, that is use of wind power a little bit late from the use of water power. And also the irrigation system, which is consists of dams. Also we call it dams, estuaries, and also canal. Okay. That is just a brief introduction about the infrastructure. The influence of industrial water mills that was created by the Muslim engineers were built in al-Andalus between the 11th and 13th centuries. There was a great deal of use of water to activate machinery in Islamic world. This was primarily through two varieties of water mill: the non-geared horizontal mill, powered by horizontal wheel with pedals, connected directly to the backstone by the shaft, and the vertical mill, whose motive force is transmitted to the stone by a gearing mechanism. The vertical undershot wheel is a pedal installed on the vertical axle of a running stream, and whose power is derived nearly entirely from the velocity of water. The overshot wheel, also vertical on a horizontal axle, with rims divided into bucket-like compartments into which water discharges, usually from an artificial channel. The horizontal wheel, which can be subdivided into two types. The first has curved or slanted vanes fitted to a central wooden rotor and is mounted at the bottom of a vertical shaft, and water from an orifice fitted to the bottom of the water tower is directed on to the vanes, the flow being thus tangential. The second type of vane will fix to the lower end of the vertical axle and is installed inside a cylinder into which the water cascades from above, turning the wheel mainly by axial flow. Muslims mastered the use of watermill not just centuries ahead of Christian West, and not just in isolated regions as usually stated, but throughout the land of Islam. In al-Andalus, where they were used in great numbers. The 10th century geographer al-Muqaddasi, for instance, speaks of the wonderful mills of the water near Nishapur in Khorasan, where there are 70 of them on the river. One description of Kur River Dam in Central Asia mentioned 10 water wheels in the vicinity driving mills. Bukhara was noted for the number of its mills driven by undershot wheels. There were many corn mills in Tabaristan too. To the west in Egypt, to the town of Bilbay on the eastern branch of Nile in Lower Egypt was an important grain processing center. The many mills there grinding corn for export to the holy cities of Hijaz. Al-Muqaddasi estimated that the annual output of grain and flour amount to 3,000 donkey loads. In North Africa, 400 mills, also including windmills after this, I will be explaining about it, were seen in Fez in the year 1184. The Repartimento of Majorca, following its capture from the Muslim, document 162 mills, and Miquel Barcelo estimate that just before the Christian conquest of 1229, there were around 197 mills in all. So it is clear that it is influenced, the water mills influence from the Muslim society, which is the industrial water mills that was based in al-Andalus, which is there were also references to mills in place such as Jain and Merida. In 10th century Palermo, then under Muslim rule, the banks of the river were lined with mill, and the instance could be multiplied, such as one could say the Muslim obsession and expertise in water mills. As Hill points out, Islamic engineers will evaluate the number of mills a waterway would activate on first sight. In fact, medieval Muslims saw each waterway not just in terms of its agricultural benefits or poetical inspiration, but also look at it from the perspective of how many mills it will generate. Thus, Al-Muqaddasi, looking at the Tigris at its source, estimate that it would turn 1 mill, and Al-Istaqi, looking at the fast-flowing stream in the province of Kiman, estimate it would turn 20 mills. Actually, what I'll say is it is just a combination of finery forge. Finery forge is a hydro-powered water mills invented in 12th century in al-Andalus. Actually, the hydro-powered water mills or finery forge also has another name, which is the Noria. Noria rotated by water power. Noria water wheels or water mills, such as the Al-Bolafia in Cordoba, turned first in Iran, where Al-Muqaddasi described numerous Norias along the Ahwaz River around year 1000. Later, the Noria became a mainstay of irrigation throughout Al-Andalus. Still today in Syria, the city of Hama's 20-meter diameter 64 feet wheel equipped with 120 compartments that empty into a stone aqueduct lingers as a nostalgic landmark alongside the Orontos River. Writing in 1154, the geographer Al-Idrisi marveled over an Al-Andalus Noria twice that size that lifts water from the Tagus River to Talavera de la Reina near Toledo. While horizontal wheel and vertical wheel water mills were both in widespread use since at least the 9th century, alongside the first windmills, a variety of industrial mills were used in the Islamic world, including mechanical fulling mills, grist mills, hullers, sawmills, ship mills, stamp mills, steel mills, sugar mills, and type mills. By the 11th century, every province throughout the Islamic world had these industrial mills in operation, from Al-Andalus and North Africa to the Middle East and Central Asia. Some medieval Islamic compartment water wheels could lift water as high as 30 meters. Muslim engineers also invented water turbines, first employed gears in mills and water rising machine, and pioneered the use of dams as source of water power, used to provide additional power to water mills and water rising machine. In contrast to other civilizations where water mills were largely owned by either the state or the elite classes, such as in China or Christian Europe, the majority of water mills in Islamic lands such as al-Andalus were instead owned by communities of peasant farmers. The bridge mill was a unique type of water mill that was built as part of superstructure of a bridge. The earliest record of a bridge mill is from Cordoba in the 12th century. The first forge to be driven by the hydropower water mill rather than manual labor, also known as finery forge or also known as the Noria, was invented in 12th century in al-Andalus. Stem mills were used by miners in Samarkand from as early as 973. They were used in medieval Persia for the purpose of crushing ore. By the 11th century, stem mills were in widespread use throughout the Islamic world, including al-Andalus. So from here, the industrial mills or the mills influenced the modern Europe, which is we can see that there are still mills that is being used by the modern Europe, which is from the La Albolafia mill on the Rio Guadalquivir. One of the most striking Islamic innovation in milling technology was the windmill. The earliest certain evidence for it is from the 10th century, though there is some evidence that it was built in Sistan, Afghanistan from the 7th century, which is 7th until 9th century. These were invariable vertical axle windmills which had long vertical drive shaft with rectangle shaped blade made of 6 to 12 cells covered in red matting or cloth material. These windmills were used to grind corn and pump water, and were used in the grist milling and sugarcane industries. Windmills were in widespread use across the Middle East and Central Asia, and later spread to India and China from there. After paper was introduced, as you can see from the photo showing the windmill of Almeria. For your information, Almeria is a fantastic destination with a wide variety of entertainment options for locals and tourists. Beach and mountains, exuberant fauna, and also magical and historical place. This place, Almeria, is a tourist place. One of the jewels that we can find in Almeria are the windmills. Since this province has almost all the wind architecture that Andalusia or infrastructure that Andalusia is famous for. So basically, the windmills of the Almeria is influence the structure, the infrastructure was influenced from Al-Andalusia. So basically, we can see the contribution, the influence of the infrastructure or technology from Al-Andalusia to the modern Europe right now. Okay, right now we're gonna proceed to the third Al-Andalus infrastructure that influenced the modern Europe. It is the irrigation systems. Irrigation systems consist of dams, canal, and acequias. Okay, first of all, we're gonna take a look at dams. Dams. There are many Muslim dams in Spain, a large number of which were built during the 10th century Anno Domini, the golden age of Umayyad power in the peninsula. In this period, for example, many small dams or azud were built on the 150-mile long river Turia, which flows into the Mediterranean at Valencia. In passing, it is important to note that Spanish word azud from Arabic al-Sad, one of many modern irrigation terms taken directly from Arabic, and certain proof of Muslim influence on Spanish technology. The azud term, it is important. Okay, 8 of these dams are spread over 6 miles of river in Valencia and serve the local irrigation system. Some of the canals carry water much further, particularly to the Valencian rice fields. These, of course, were established by the Muslims and continue to be one of the most important rice producing centers in Europe. Because of their safe design and method of construction, and because they were provided with deep and very firm foundations, the Turia dams have been able to survive the dangerous flood conditions for 1,000 years. Yeah, you can see that the influence of dams of the Umayyad golden age of Umayyad really influenced the modern Europe. Okay, the second irrigation system is Qanat system or Qanats. It is first, what is Qanat? It is underground tunnels which is 1.8 meter high and 1 meter wide, with a canal in the floor of the tunnel which carries water at regular intervals, where like opening extend from the surface to the tunnel floor, and it is through these openings that the tunnels were built and through which they are maintained. The underground nature of the canal reduced evaporation. So the Qanat system was an efficient method for irrigation and water supply. It originated in pre-Islamic Iran. The Qanat technology spread westward to North Africa, Spain, and Sicily. The Andalusi agronomical writers provide practical advice on well digging and Qanat construction. From Spain, and Qanat technology was transferred to the New World, and Qanats have been found in Mexico, Peru, and Chile. In the 1970s, a Qanat system, which is 2.3 kilometers long, was located in La Venta area, just 10 kilometers northwest of Guadalajara, Mexico. In Palermo, Italy, a Qanat system from the Arab days was used to bring fresh water to the city and to irrigate its beautiful gardens. These are the current plans to revive the reconstruction of the Arabic Qanat and utilize it to solve the acute needs of the modern city of Palermo for potable water. The project in hand is of great historical, archaeological, geological, and hydrogeological importance. It is already of great interest for tourists. So, the current plans to revive the reconstruction of the Arabic Qanat, which is from the al-Andalus influence the modern Europe, to revive it. The structure, the infrastructure, which is influence the construction of it. So it can be seen the influence here. It's really crucial. Okay, the last one of the irrigation system is acequia. Pardon my pronunciation, as it's just difficult for me to pronounce it. Acequia. and a sequía flowing toward Granada from the spring in the village of Alfuca in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada was the first built in the 30th century, and it is still flowing today. It is still flowing today. The Arabic system in irrigation were diffused from al-Andalus to Christian Spain. This accounts for the Aragonese traditions of irrigation. This system of irrigation had migrated from Spain to America, where we find them still practiced in San Antonio in Texas. The story begins properly in the Canary Island, where in the late 15th century settlers from Spain introduced Islamic institution of water distribution. They brought with them to the American Southwest both the technology and institutional framework for irrigation and the distribution of water. Yeah, can be seen clearly. The also the acequias of al-Andalus also influenced the modern Europe. And now, not just Europe, to America too. We can see here. And these are the example of the photo of the dams, acequias, and also canal. Here you can see dams, Marit dams in Yemen, canal in Spain, and acequia in the village of Alfuca that's still flowing today. Okay, we're gonna proceed to the second influence of Andalus technology to the modern Europe, which is agriculture. Modern agriculture system in the 9th century. Okay, as early as the 9th century, and essentially modern agricultural system became central to economic life and organization in Arab Caliphate, replacing the largely export-driven Roman model. It started. Okay, I'm gonna explain how it started. It started with zakat, an Islamic tax on large land holding, which slowly broke the land monopoly of the mobility that had smothered the rural economy for centuries. Cities of the Near East, North Africa, and Moorish Spain were supported by elaborated agricultural system, which included extensive irrigation based on knowledge of hydraulic and hydrostatic principles, some of which were continued from Roman times. Okay, the introduction of the new crops. This is the most important point, which is the introduction of new crops, transforming private farming into new global industry exported everywhere, including Europe, where farming was mostly restricted to wheat strains obtained much earlier through Central Asia. Spain received that what she in turn transmitted to the rest of Europe. Many agricultural and fruit growing processes, together with many new plants, fruits, and vegetables. These new crops included sugarcane, rice, citrus, fruit, apricots, cotton, artichokes, aubergines, and saffron, and also others previously known were further developed. Several were later exported from Spanish coastal areas to the Spanish colonies in the New World. Also transmitted through Muslim influence, a silk industry flourished. Flax was cultivated and linen exported, and esparto grass, which grew wild in the more arid parts, was collected and turned into various articles. The process of getting all these new crops was not an easy task. I'm going to explain how it's not an easy task, which is as some might assume it was. It was difficult to take these new plants and fruits to the Iberian Peninsula, and in case it was done illegally, bringing them was difficult in many cases because there were specific varieties of plants that were not allowed to be removed from Muslim territories and that people had to smuggle out. However, in the end, this process proved very helpful to the Iberian Peninsula. The economic implications were enormous. By having so many new crops, people began to become more healthy, and due to this, there was a great economic upturn in this time. So, based on the story, the agriculture influence to the modern Europe, which is the introduction of the new crops, and also the irrigation and hydraulic technology, which is uh, we had explained before. It really very related to the water mills, stem mill, or finery forge, or something like that. It's really related to the dams and canal. So that canal irrigation system is very related to the agriculture, and it is one of the influence to the modern Europe right now. For now, the influence for the modern Europe is the new crops. The new crops, which are sugarcane, rice, citrus fruit, apricots, cotton, many more. Now we're gonna proceed to the third and the last technology influence to the modern Europe, which is aviation. Aviation is something related to flying, or aircraft, or something that is about flying in the air. Okay, this influence will be the most interesting one. It's related to the one person, one figure, which is very popular. He is Abbas ibn Firnas. Abbas ibn Firnas was born in Izen Onda, al-Andalus, or also known as today Ronda, Spain, but lived in the Emirate of Cordoba, which was one of the major centers of learning in the Muslim world. He was a polymath, an inventor, engineer, aviator, physician, and Arabic poet. The stories say that Ibn Firnas was influenced by one named Armand Firman in 852 Common Era. This is a person who made a living by pulling stones. He was no scientist, but by observing the nature around him and based on a rudimentary understanding of the mechanics of flight, he constructed a suit of silk with wood reinforced rods. Taking this crude machine, Armin Firman climbed to the top of the minaret of the Grand Mosque in Kurtuba and jumped. He did not fly. He plummeted. But fortunately, his flying contraption inflated just enough to slow his descent so he did not fall at full speed. Hitting the ground, he was mildly hurt, but he was not dead or crippled. This was probably the first parachute jump. This person, Armand Firman, influenced Abbas ibn Firnas. In 9th century, al-Andalus, Abbas ibn Firnas invented a primitive version of parachute. In 852, a new caliph and a bizarre experiment, a daredevil named Armand Firnas, which is I have explained, the one who influenced Abbas ibn Firnas. Ibn Firnas was also the first to make an attempt at controlled flight, as opposed to earlier gliding attempts in ancient China, which were not controllable. Ibn Firnas manipulated the flight control of his hang glider using two sets of artificial wings to adjust his altitude, and to change his direction. He successfully returned to where he had lifted off from, but his landing was unsuccessful. Ibn Firnas was the first man in history to make scientific attempts at flying. Ibn Firnas' glider was possibly the first hang glider, though there were earlier instances of manned kites being used in ancient China. Knowledge of Firman and Firnas' flying machine spread to other parts of Europe from Arabic reference. Ibn Firnas' hang glider was also the first to have artificial wing, though the flight was ultimately unsuccessful. In the context of aerospace, Abbas ibn Firnas is an extraordinary reference point as the creator of the precursor to the parachute, and for being the first person to successfully design, build, and test artifacts that remain in flight. He did this 600 years before Leonardo da Vinci developed his design for flying machine, and more than 1,000 years before the Wright brothers made their famous flight. His first aeronautical milestone was achieved in year 852 when he jumped into the void from the tower of Cordoba Mosque using canvas as an innovative parachute. Nothing like it had ever been attempted before, or at least nobody had lived to tell the tale until then. The result was a relatively rapid descent involving a rough landing and several broken bones, but it led to a firm conviction that the method could work. This event is widely considered as the first use of parachute in history. So, from this, we can see the influence of Ibn Firnas of the al-Andalus, Ibn Firnas in al-Andalus, to the modern Europe, which is the modern Europe, the the construction, the the development of hang glider, or we can say aeroplane or parachute. It is the basis from the al-Andalus. So that's from me.
Moving on to the linguistic and literature, we will talk about those two, linguistic and literature, translation and also philosophy in Andalus. In the 12th century, Ibn Tufail, an Andalusian Arabian philosopher, has demonstrated Avicenna's theory of tabula rasa in his Arabic novel entitled Hayy ibn Yaqzan. In the novel, he depicted the development of the mind of a feral child, where there's a line that says, from a tabula rasa to that of an adult, in complete isolation from society, on a desert island. His work has been translated into Latin and was renamed as Philosophus Autodidactus. It was published in 1671 by Edward Pocock the Younger, and the first English translation was done by Simon Oakley in 1708. This translation later may have inspired Daniel Defoe to write Robinson Crusoe, which featured a desert island narrative, apart from influencing John Locke's formulation of tabula rasa in one of his works, an essay concerning human understanding. Locke's work went on to become one of the principal sources of empiricism in modern Western philosophy and has influenced many Enlightenment philosophers such as David Hume and George Berkeley. Apart from Muslim philosophers, there are also Jewish poets and commentators like Judah Halevi and Dunash bin Labrat, who contributed to the cultural life of Andalus, mainly focusing on the development of their own Jewish philosophies. Judah wrote secular poetry in the form of love songs and riddles other than writing religious poetry. His poetry had a remarkable and apparently indissoluble union of religion, nationalism and patriotism, which was so characteristic of post-exilic Judaism. One of his famous works is called the Kuzari, or its full title, Book of Refutation and Proof on Behalf of the Despised Religion, written in 1140. Meanwhile, for Dunash bin Labrat, he is the founder of Andalusian Hebrew poetry, in which he first introduced Arabic meter into Hebrew poetry. This pattern of poetry can be seen in his work entitled The Riddle of Dunash bin Labrat, which is widely known as among the first Hebrew riddle. In linguistics, he was among the first Hebrew grammarians to distinguish between transitive and intransitive verbs, the first to list verbs by their three-letter roots in the Paul construction, and the first to distinguish between light and heavy roots. For translations, the Toledo School of Translators, which was established after Toledo was reconquered by the Christian forces in 1085, has translated the work of many Islamic scholars that previously could have only be accessed by Muslims, especially in al-Andalus and Islamic Sicily. The Toledo School of Translators mainly translated from Arabic into Latin, which has contributed to European sciences discoveries and inventions. Andalus also has another productive translator in Casta called Gerard of Cremona. He has translated 87 books from Arabic to Latin, including Al-Khawarizmi's Algebra and Al-Muqabala, Jabir ibn al-Flah's Elementa Astronomica, Al-Kindi's on Optic, Al-Fargani's on Elements of Astronomy on the Celestial Motions, Al-Farabi on the Classifications of the Sciences, and many more. With the help of the translators during that period, Andalus managed to pass down the scientific and technological initiatives of the Islamic world to the Europeans, and also laid the foundations for Europe's Renaissance and scientific revolution. On this slide, on the left side we have a painting of Toledo, and on the right side we have a cathedral of Toledo that was once a translation center in 12th century. Next is philosophy. There are many philosophers in Andalus that has influenced and contributed to modern Europe. One of them is Khalid Abdurrahman III, who had collected libraries of books and granted patronage to scholars of medicine and ancient sciences. Under his government, Cordoba became the most important intellectual center of Western Europe. Al-Mustansir or Al-Hakam II has built a university and libraries in Cordoba. Cordoba became one of the world's leading centers of medicine and philosophical debate during his period. He would have books purchased from many countries such as Damascus, Baghdad, Constantinople, Mecca, Medina, Kufa and Basra. During his reign, there also a massive translation effort that was undertaken and many books were translated from Latin and Greek into Arabic. Al-Majriti or Maslamah Ibn Ahmad Al-Majriti was an active astronomer, chemist, mathematician, economist and scholar of Andalus during the reign of Al-Hakam II. He has also contributed into the field of philosophy where he wrote Ghayat al-Hakim or The Aim of Sage or Picatrix, which explored a synthesis of Platonism with Hermetic philosophy. Its use of incantations led the book to be widely dismissed in later years, although the Sufi communities continue to study it. He also journeyed all over the Islamic world and beyond and kept in touch with the Brethren of Purity and have brought the 51 epistle of the Brethren Poetry to Al-Andalus. And he edited the compendium to his work, although it is quite possible that it was added later by another scholar with the name of Al-Majriti. The encyclopedia was believed to contribute to the popularization and legitimization of Platonism in the Islamic world. Apart from involving in the writing of literature, Ibn Tufail's previously mentioned philosophical novel, Hayy Ibn Yaqzan, has contributed to the philosophical work in Andalus, where he developed the themes of empiricism, tabula rasa, nature versus nurture, condition of possibility, and materialism. It also foreshadowed Molineux' problem proposed by William Molineux to Locke, who included it in the second book of an essay concerning human understanding. Lastly, we have Averroes or Ibn Rushd, who was a polymath and also a jurist who wrote about many subjects including philosophy. He has authored more than 100 books and treatises, which include numerous commentaries on Aristotle, for which he was known in the West as the commentator and father of rationalism, and also founder of the Averroism school of philosophy. His Latin translated work has become one of the available sources in universities in Western Europe during the 13th century.
Assalamualaikum everyone, my name is Ayu Surianti. So I will be talking about the impact of Islam on the culture in modern Europe, specifically in terms of music, the cuisine and also the architecture. So in terms of music, the Moorish gave Spain the following musical instruments that later adopted by other Europeans. They were lute, guitar, tambourine, castanet, harp, bagpipes, and flamenco, which also known as Moorish flamenco. Some instruments like the Spanish guitar or the Portuguese adufe are of Muslim origins. Besides, Portuguese fado and Andalusian flamenco might also have been influenced by the Moors. A number of musical instruments that we use in classical music, particularly in Spanish music, are believed to have been derived from Arabic musical instruments used in Al-Andalus. For example, like the lute, which was derived from the al-ud, the guitar from the Arabs, where European borrowed this instrument and even kept the name calling it the lute. The oud was traditionally played with an eagle feather, which nowadays the pick or rishi is usually made of cow horns of plastic, and the flamenco guitar, which still shares many techniques with the oud. The influence in terms of cuisine was the invention of pasta or macaroni, like the one that we know today. So durum wheat, unlike soft bread wheat, contains less moisture and more gluten or protein, which makes the stretchy dough can be rolled and shaped. So this durum wheat can also be stored for a long time, where only soft wheat was grown, pasta wasn't possible. So scholars trace the movement of durum wheat from Central Asia across the Muslim lands through literary sources. Spain and Sicily under Muslim rule were both places where pasta was mentioned and durum wheat or semolina was grown. So Andalusian geographer Ahmad al-Razi described hard wheat in Toledo in the 9th century, saying the air of Toledo is excellent and grain stays a long time without changing. It is repeated by other writers, and a 30th century Andalusian cookbook contains early reference to macaroni, which it was described as round balls, thin sheets, and long noodles like vermicelli. The Arabic name for pasta is itria, a word that spread with variation into other languages, including Spanish, alatria, and familiar word tria or trich in Italian. It is no doubt that Islam had left a magnificent architectural legacy in modern Europe. Like we see in the slide is the Great Mosque of Cordoba. It is one of the oldest structures still standing from the time Muslim ruled al-Andalus. The site was originally home to a Roman temple, which was later replaced by a Christian Visigoth church. In 711, when the Moors took Andalusia from the Christians, the Visigoth structure was divided into two halves and used as a place of worship by both Muslims and Christians. But in 784, on the orders of the Emir Abdul Rahman, the church was destroyed and the work on a great mosque began. And the structure is regarded as one of the most accomplished monuments of Moorish architecture built by the European Moors. And the Great Mosque of Cordoba exhibited features and an architectural appearance similar to the Umayyad Mosque of Damascus, which may have been used as a model. And the mosque held a place of importance amongst the Islamic community of al-Andalus for 3 centuries. In Cordoba, the capital, the mosque was seen as the heart and central focus of the city. Moving on to the next slide, which is the Al-Jaferia Palace. So it is a complex group of structures that have been built around one another from the Islamic age until modern times, including Christian modifications during the Middle Ages. So the Muslim palace is the best preserved palace complex from the epoch of the Taifa kingdoms on the Iberian Peninsula. It was built using traditional models in Islamic Palatine architectures, which is a large open central courtyard leading to all of the living rooms with 2 pools on the north and south side. The ceremonial and private rooms also located on the north and south ends of the buildings. So the Palatine structure still exists in some regions of Iberia, even though most of them were rebuilt with a Christian aesthetic after the Reconquista. In 1118, the Muslim Taifa of Zaragoza came to an end as the city was conquered by the Christian kingdom of Aragon. So the building would go on to become a royal residence for the region's new Christian rulers and would eventually become the royal palace of Spain's most famous king and queen. Another example of architectural influence in modern Europe is the Mosque of Crista de la Luz. It is a former mosque in Toledo, Spain, and the building is constructed of brick and small stones, and these techniques are a reflection of both the local building tradition as well as the influence from the Caliphate in Cordoba. And the influence of the Caliphate can be seen in the brickwork of the facade of the building, which resembles those seen at the Cathedral Mosque or the Great Mosque of Cordoba. And it was converted into a church around 1085 This occurred when Toledo was taken control by the Christians. Mudejar, or I believe it was pronounced Mudejar, was originally the term used for Moors or Muslims of al-Andalus who remained in Iberia after the Christian reconquista but were not initially forcibly converted to Christianity or exile. And the word Mudejar references several historical interpretations and cultural borrowings. Mudejar style does not refer to a distinct architectural style but to the application of traditional technical, ornamental, and decorative elements derived from Islamic arts to Romanesque, Gothic, and Renaissance architectural styles in the Christian kingdoms of Iberia, mostly during the 30th, 40th, and 50th centuries, although it continued to appear in Spanish and Portuguese architectural as well as in other regions, most notably in Hispanic America in the 16th and 17th centuries. Mudejar decorations and ornamentation includes stylized calligraphy and intricate geometry and vegetal forms, and the classic architectural Mudejar elements include the horseshoe and multi-loop arc, wooden roofing, fired bricks, and also glass ceramic tiles. The Moorish style architecture continued to be popular even after Muslim rule was pushed out of Spain by the Reconquista, and many Christian cathedrals were built in the Moorish architectural style, and this Spanish Moorish artistic style became known as the Mudejar style, like I mentioned before. And the Islamic architectural influences did not stop with the Reconquista. In fact, Spanish and Portuguese architecture continued to apply traditional Islamic ornamental and decorative elements to Christian Romanesque, Gothic, and Renaissance architectural styles, and these styles, referred as Mudejar, like I mentioned before, can still be seen in many different constructions, from palaces to churches, military, or urban architecture. So the Alcazar of Seville or the Sintra Palace in Portugal are Christian Palatine structures built with Islamic and traditional Christian ornamentations. So to conclude these presentations, I think we all can agree that all the achievement and acknowledgement of philosophers in Al-Andalus has proved that their contribution has somehow influenced modern Europe. The fact that we can still see and learn about them and their achievements even until today, it proves that the influences in Al-Andalus has also put its impacts on the current era, which is the 21st century. So I think that's all from us, and thank you so much for your attention.